The final recording for you guys to watch then in chapter 2 is going to talk about predominantly leadership style. So we've spent the last couple of recordings thinking about how an organisation behaves, what motivates people to behave in a certain way, and also thinking about how we bring those individuals together as a group then. This recording, starting off with section 13.6, starts to introduce this leadership idea. So when we looked at Belbin's team roles, we discussed the leader. We said that they were calm, they enabled others to work, and they were very good at coordinating the rest of the team. Now, how effective that person is going to depend massively on their leadership style and how much they're allowed to behave in the way that they want to. So before we jump into looking at different types of leadership style, we've just got to introduce this idea that actually how you behave as a leader is going to be influenced by how you kind of take on certain roles. So, have you got the authority to actually manage your team or lead your team correctly? So if I'm a leader of a team, but actually I don't have any responsibility or any authority over people, it really limits the amount I can actually coordinate. So I need to have some sort of authority to be able to make people or to encourage people to behave in a certain way. Also thinking about autonomy. So am I going to be a leader that actually tells everyone exactly what they have to do? Or am I going to allow them some sort of freedom? So you might think back to previous roles where you've been able to introduce some of your own ideas, or maybe you're thinking of a scenario where actually you were very kind of micromanaged, so your leader or your manager was telling you exactly what to do all of the time, and how you might have felt about that. Finally, then we've got this overall idea of leadership to tie it together. And it's all about how I actually use the power. So have I used the power in a way to win a willing and positive response from my subordinates? So I might have authority, but actually I might use that in a terrible way and never get anybody on board. Now over the page we start to think about some different leadership styles, and again you might recognize some of these criteria from perhaps even yourself or other times that you've been led by a manager, for example, at work. Now this model was introduced by Likert, and Likert identified 4 basic leadership styles. So an exploitative or an authoritative style, a benevolent authoritative style, a consultative style, and a participative style. And essentially all we're doing is working from one extreme down here on the left to the other extreme down here on the right, and we're just gradually phasing from a very authoritative style of management, telling people what to do and making all the decisions, all the way down then to very participative and actually enabling my workers or my the rest of my team, my subordinates to make decisions themselves. So again, in terms of questions for the exam, you could simply be asked to recall one of these types of leadership styles, or again they could perhaps describe a scenario where you were to asked to then suggest what type of leadership style this person displayed. Now obviously that can be quite subjective, so it's likely that they'll probably focus on one of these extremes, because it's a bit easier to describe somebody on one of the extremes, and the difference between, for example, leadership style 2 and 3 here might be a bit hazier, a bit less clear cut. So anything that's going to be quite subjective, you'll normally find that they use quite an extreme way to ensure you are able to get the right answer. Okay, so let's just run through these. So I'm going to focus on 1 and 4, and 2 and 3 really are just varying degrees towards each extreme. So in terms of decision making, in an exploitative or an authoritative leadership style, I would just impose my own decisions. So I make the decisions, I tell you what to do, and you go off and do them. Down on the other end of the spectrum then we've got this trust and discussion. So I open the idea up to the team, and they are able to contribute some good ideas, and we make a decision as a group. Motivation style, well, an authoritative or an exploitative authoritative style of leader may assume that people need to be motivated by threats. So think back to Taylor's ideas around motivation, where he said that actually punishment was a pretty key part of motivating people, all the way down then to a participative leadership style, where actually we bring in rewards. So we decide what we need to achieve at the start of the period, and then when my team achieve those, I give them some rewards to keep them motivated. Decision making with an authoritative style, very much made centrally, so essentially by me, the leader, and with a participative style, very much about delegation, so allowing people to make their own decisions. Communication wise, well, if I'm making all the decisions, I don't necessarily need to communicate that well with my subordinates. If I'm allowing people to make their own decisions and allowing people to have this open discussion around ideas, a participative style of management or leadership then would lead to more frequent communication. Finally, in terms of teamwork, an authoritative style of management would assume that people act individually, so I need to look at them individually. There's no teamwork going on. A participative manager or leader would assume that because you're treating people a bit more equally, they work as a team, okay, and I'm part of that team as the leader. Now, in terms of which style is best, probably as I've been describing them, then you're thinking about the participative style perhaps being better. So if you did think that, then you're in good company, because Likert himself said exactly the same. So he said it was ideal for a profit-orientated and human-conscious business. However, there are scenarios where actually a more authoritative style of leadership works better. So the example we've got here is a small entrepreneurial business. So if I'm the key idea man within my business and I've brought a couple of other people on to do certain roles, I really need to be making the decisions because it's my money on the line. Also, think about the army, for example. You wouldn't necessarily want in the heat of battle for a group to come together and make decisions. You normally need one person who's decisive and takes charge in that scenario. Tagged on to Likert's work around those leadership styles then, he also came up with 4 characteristics of effective managers. So an effective manager, according to Likert, should be employee-centered rather than work-orientated. So the primary concern should be for the person. Should be setting high standards, but you should be flexible enough to ensure that you allow people to work in their own way to achieve those standards. A leadership or a leader with natural delegation skills, able to trust their employees, and again this idea of being participative, so allowing people to participate in decision making and so on. The final thing we're going to look at in chapter 2 then is just a bit more specific to IT. So obviously the syllabus for what was business and finance has now been adjusted to increase the focus on the technology side of an organization, and this section 14 then is one of the areas that have come in relatively recently into the syllabus. So we'll have a run through our key considerations, and again this is just specific to managing now an IT function, so we need to put our IT hats on and think about what would be potentially different in terms of managing an IT function or just any other function within our organization. Okay, now when we're considering this IT function overall as from the point of view of a manager, we really need to consider certain characteristics that make this a slightly different approach or a slightly different beast than just managing another team within the organization. So, for example, although every department should be trying to add persistent value, IT functions in particular are focused massively on this. When you also consider the pace of change, IT systems and IT capabilities are going to change constantly. So the speed of change is much higher than in other teams around the organization. So we're just going to run through these different considerations. Possibilities. So like I said, lots of changes within the IT organization within a team within an organization because of those different technological changes. So it's really important that we're keeping up to date with everything that we need to, and that can be very difficult. It's very common to introduce a system and that system immediately be outdated. The other issue around this kind of constant change is compliance. So am I ensuring that we've got ensuring that we've got, for example, good data protection in place? And when I'm constantly changing systems, I'm not allowing any information for my customers, for example, to be leaked. I need to make sure that I'm good at planning. So some teams work quite well with less planning and actually a more fluid approach. IT functions tend not to be like that. So they really need to be very thoughtful in terms of planning and preparation, and not just for this year, but for a longer term view. Also important to consider that there might be a difference between IT service delivery and IT service support. So we've got a few roles here, a few different jobs within the business, and we split them into those types just so we're able to distinguish between the two. So for example, something like data extraction would be classed as IT service delivery, or report distribution, so these jobs that actually get done on a day-to-day basis, customer billing and budgeting, for example. IT service support then is going to be supporting those activities, so making sure we've got the right configuration of IT equipment, making sure that we've got good physical and logical integrity, so making sure that people aren't accessing the system that shouldn't be. Next, we've got considering IT outsourcing. So obviously outsourcing is very popular within organizations in terms of enabling a specialized group to come in and do a role that you're perhaps not as good at. And IT tends to be very popular or very common in terms of outsourcing. By outsourcing IT, you're able to obtain some expert knowledge without having to recruit a team yourself. And perhaps if you're in a smaller organization, you haven't got the amount of IT problems that would necessitate having a full-time team. So by outsourcing to a company that provides that service to you, you're able to draw down on that expert knowledge without having to pay them for essentially sitting around and doing nothing. Now, if you're going to have an outsourcing arrangement like this, it's very important that at the center of this is a good, strong service level agreement. And what this service level agreement will do is enabling everybody to know where they stand. So it says exactly what has to happen in certain scenarios. So, for example, when I ring the IT support team and I tell them that my printer's not working, there should be a response time that's been agreed in advance. And often when you call an IT service line, there'll be different categories of problems. So, priority 1 to 4, priority A to D, and it just enables you to categorize those problems and make sure that the response time is good enough. Finally, then, linking back to this pace of change again, making sure that we are being innovative and making sure we are investing in our IT service. It's really important that we're not left behind by competitors, because lots of times the IT department is going to be one area that a competitor could perhaps gain an advantage over us. So that's the end of chapter 2 then. Up next in chapter 3, we start to look at different organizational and business structures. Again, make sure as you're working your way through the notes that you're just dipping in and out of that question bank to make sure you get an idea of the types of questions that can come up. Obviously, there's lots of memorizing to go on between this phase of your studies and the exam, but just getting an idea of the types of questions that can come up is really, really useful to gauge how much information you need to try and retain.